In 1974, if you wanted to be a rock star, you just needed a stack of Marshalls and 10-minute guitar solo. But by 1985, that guitar was not a hero anymore. It was just a background texture.
2 decades after Dr. John Chowning discovered the phenomenon of FM synthesis, almost half of which was spent by Yamaha trying to make the process manageable, the DX7 arrived.
What happened? Most people blame fashion or the rise of MTV, but the truth is much more technical. The death of the legendary guitar solo wasn't a creative choice, it was a frequency war. And the weapon was a brown 61 key box from Japan. No matter how much or how little money you have in your pocket, you can almost certainly find a synthesizer that will give you some musical satisfaction. That cost $2,000 and was almost impossible to program. The DX7, I still think it's impossible to program. I can't be bothered with it. Today we are looking at the illegal math of the Yamaha DX7. We are going to see how a single digital preset occupied the exact same sonic space as a Gibson Les Paul, and why producers, faced with the choice between the temperamental guitar hero and the perfect digital frequency, chose the machine. This is the story of how the 1980s didn't just change the music, it changed the physics of the mix. Before we understand the killer, we have to understand the victim. In the 1970s, progressive rock was built on what we called harmonic saturation. Think about the Hammond B3 organ, the mellotron, and the overdriven guitar. These instruments are imperfect. They produce odd-order harmonics. They are wide. When David Gilmour or Steve Hackett played the solo, they weren't just plain notes. They were filling a massive frequency pocket between 400 Hz and 3000 Hz. This is the sweet spot of human hearing. In the 70s, the mix was built around this pocket, but there was a problem. Analog gear is noisy, it's muddy. If you had a Moog, a Hammond, and a Marshall all playing at once, the mix became a war zone. This is why 70s prog often sounds dark. Then came 1983.
Given Yamaha all they needed to bring programmable FM to the world. In 1983, Yamaha released the first wave of DX synthesizers. We take a look at the legendary Yamaha DX7.
In that year, Yamaha released the DX7. It didn't use oscillators and filters like a Moog. It used frequency modulation, or FM synthesis.
Tone, and some of the timbres at certain frequencies shared the same pitch characteristics. His musical ear had picked up on something significant, and so here in 1967, John Chowning had discovered the door to FM.
Now, here's the secret ingredient. FM synthesis is based on pure sine waves modulating each other at incredibly high speeds.
He rounded out FM. It gave you all the bits that you didn't get with simple FM.
This created a sound that was the polar opposite of a guitar. It was cold, it was glassy, it was crystalline. I found ways to destabilize the DX7 a little bit to create interactions between it and other instruments that are more interesting. But most importantly, it was precise.
Well, at the beginning of the 80s, there was some great new technology available that hadn't been available before.
The DX7 didn't have harmonic mud. It had sideband frequencies that were mathematically perfect. When the keyboardist hit a note on DX7, it cut through a mix like a laser through butter. Producers in the early 80s, guys like Trevor Horn or Quincy Jones, realized something revolutionary.
Which was sort of Vince Hill meets Kraftwerk. I thought I want to make electronic records that work in the mainstream.
If they used DX7, they didn't have to spend 6 hours EQing the mud out of the mix. The DX7 sat perfectly in the high mids, leaving the bottom for the new digital drum machines. The Guitar Hero was suddenly in the way. Most of the factory sounds that I use are great, and I haven't been able to improve on them. Everybody wants the brass, electric piano, and string sounds. Imagine you're a session guitarist in 1984.
Beginning of the 80s, people knew about sort of digital audio, but they didn't really understand how it worked and what it was capable of.
You walk into the studio with your pedal board, ready to lay down a soaring, Gilmour-esque solo. But the producer has already laid down a DX7 tine piano track on a digital bell pad. I very seldom go through presets. I don't like anybody to see me sliding my finger up and down the presets on the DX7. These digital sounds occupy the same exact 1 to 3 kHz range as your lead guitar.
David Bristow and Gary Leuenberger. And then it says Gary Leuenberger created the electric piano sound for the DX7, the most overused sound in the history of music.
When you play, the producer hears clutter. For the first time in rock history, the guitar sounded old and distorted compared to the clean digital sheen of the mix. This is the secret reason why guitar solos became shorter, more processed, and eventually they just disappeared from the top 40.
From Brian Eno to Kenny Loggins, from Herbie Hancock to Whitney Houston, the DX7 was everywhere. It defined the sound of an entire decade.
It wasn't that people stopped liking guitar, it was that the mix couldn't fit them anymore. The DX7 frequency was a digital weapon that evicted the guitar from the center of the song. So how did our prog heroes survive this? Well, look at Genesis. Tony Banks embraced the digital coldness. In Mama, on Home by the Sea, the synths aren't trying to sound like flutes anymore. They sound like machines. You got into things like the Yamaha DX7, which were quite impossible to program, so you'd stick with the presets, or add effects to them in order to get sounds. Look at Trevor Rabin era Yes. The guitars in Owner of a Lonely Heart aren't warm, they are processed to sound as sharp and square as the synths. They had to digitalize the guitar just to make it audible.
So did it come from a Fairlight?
No. Just Trevor Rabin played
yes.
that. It was one take. One take apart from the last two notes.
And one pan pot, I believe.
Yeah, he was annoyed with me about that.
They had to give up the analog dream to survive the digital reality. Today we look back at the DX7 as a cheesy 80s sound. But it was more than a trend. It was a fundamental shift in how humans perceive clarity in music. The era of the unlimited guitar solo ended because we traded warmth of the human mistake for the precision of the digital frequency. Was it worth it? I think most of our viewers would say no. But the 100 million people who bought these records in the 80s said yes. In the next video, we are going to look at illegal multitrack tapes Pink Floyd used to fake their live shows. Another example of the machine taking over the stage. Thank you for listening and have a great day.